It worked. Did better than I would have done.
It put it together.
So are you using PowerPoint in Microsoft?
Yeah. You have to pay extra, I think. It gives me 5 slide threes. So I just had and put some of my notes in there, and it came up with this. And it should probably be like oriented differently and all kinds of things that I could obsess about. But so Angie's lesson on buyer consults, there's tons of them out there. We're going to talk about all the different resources that are out there. I think if nothing else for today, for me, what I'm going to impress on you is the fact that done is better than perfect. It's real estate. It's real estate. Learn the important things, and then sometimes you just have to let stuff go and get it done, right? So I have a part of me that could very much dig into being a perfectionist, but after 18 years in real estate now, you just have to. If you want to be a real estate agent, if you want to be successful in any market, it takes that, let it go, do the things, and make sure that important things are met. Important things always have to be met. We still hear you, Amber. Yeah, go tell her. I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, is there anybody else on Zoom today? Okay. Well, good. Okay, so that's the lesson again. We have a couple of other things that I've learned. Well, and I wanted to start off by just letting you know that
That is so weird. That is so weird.
This is it. Oh, unless that messed up Zoom. Doesn't mess up Zoom, right?
I don't think so. It will, like, if somebody was talking to you
Okay.
from Zoom.
Okay.
Oh, I think it was just Raina walking in and telling her, maybe that's why I felt loud.
All right, that'll work. So, quick stuff about me. Hey, girl. Good to see you. Thanks for coming by.
Of course, I'm here from the master.
Absolutely.
Well, you missed the first part of it. It's like, here's Angie. This is what you're going to learn from me more than anything else. Done is better than perfect in real estate. Get it done. Find the best things. Make sure you know the best things, and then just move on. All the pretty is just not my thing. It's just not. And you know, hire people that can do all the pretty if you really, really want it, and then learn how to do that too. So what you're going to see with me is not a lot of pretty. It's just going to be like nuts and bolts, like way I do things. Yeah. Hi.
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 I know realtors are late, we should always start late.
I know, right? Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so what you're gonna see, like for instance, this lovely PowerPoint slideshow kind of makes me crazy a little bit because I didn't get it perfect, and I don't, at the end of the day, you're still gonna get the right information, the information that works for me. And, you know, AI, I got to play around with AI and learn some more stuff. So, which is the other part of real estate. So my big quote that I decided to use is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And of course that works with sellers also, but I think there's a whole nother level of buyers, especially if they're first-time home buyers or they haven't purchased in a long time, feeling like you're in a big ocean that has lots of waves, and they come, you know, a lot of people feel very unsure of how to move forward. And the more stability and assurance and understanding that you have on how to walk them through that, the more you will get them on board to accept your consultation, and accept, being a team environment, not an adversarial environment. So that's why I chose that. That's the philosophy that I run my, especially buyer business off of. Both buyer and seller. So for me, I got my license in '06. I started practicing in '07. I rode the whole market down in Ocala, in a market where $40,000 short sales were normal, and they took 9 months to close. So we learned a lot. My record was 23 months on a $50-something thousand short sale. So it was not easy. And at the time, I had just received my license in '06, and my husband was still working a really successful job in construction. And my mother was she was battling cancer. And so I was homeschooling my son. So I already had like a full plate, but I went ahead and did my license. I knew I wanted to get it. I had the opportunity to get that part done. And then my husband halfway through 2007 came home with cancer. So he was laid off. He started looking for other jobs in construction, and they were nowhere to be found at that point. It wasn't an option. So, so he ended up eventually getting his real estate license as well. And we learned a whole new way to do things. But by 2008, January 2008 was when board dues were due, and half of the board membership dropped in Ocala. So it was, holy cow. So that was like my wake-up call. Like I sold 7 between July and the end of 2007. And then it was like, it stopped. It just came to a so when people talk about this market and the changes, to me, it's still like, it ain't short sales, So we're gonna be fine. It just requires that you do the work. You learn a little bit more, you work a little bit longer, you make a few more calls. And working with buyers, I believe in the end this change is gonna be a really good thing for our industry. So learning how to properly represent a buyer finally is something that is going to become mainstream and not odd. I've been using the Buyer Brokerage Agreement for about 10 years. That in Ocala, I got burned once, the first time it happened with a buyer. I'm like, I don't want to do that again. So I created my own version of a buyer consult, but I didn't understand how to transition it to signing the paper. Plus everybody said, oh, it's not worth the paper it's written on, blah, 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 right? So I was like, I would just have that belly-to-belly, face-to-face conversation that I need you to be loyal to me or I can't do my thing, basically. And people would agree, and I assumed it was on them if they'd actually break that promise. So that was kind of how it started. The first time I went through Nikki Baldini's class was the first time that I really understood how to connect the two. And why, even if you're not actually going to pursue someone through a buyer broker agreement for payment, it's still important for them to put their signature on paper. There's an extra layer of conversation that happens once in a while between the time they say, sure, yeah, I'll use you, and they actually write it down. Okay? So now it's going to be the law of the land, and that's fabulous. So now it's time to talk about how do you present that and moving forward. For learning resources, does everybody have a pen? There are plenty of other buyer consultations out there. I just want to make sure everybody knows where to go get the resources, because mine's going to move a little bit faster into, like I said, kind of details on nuts and bolts on how to talk to a buyer. As I said, Nikki Baldini's List Your Buyers for Success. It's on YouTube. It's in KW Connect. She's a KW University teacher. Through instructor through KWU, so she has lots of classes, but this was her most famous, if you will, and it really does connect the dots on how to make that conversation fluid and not uncomfortable, right? List your buyers, okay, so Gary Keller, Value Squared, has everyone seen that at this point? Okay, no, it's really good, and he brings up a couple of points that I'll bring up here too. The other one
What
is
was it called?
Gary Keller, Value Squared, but it's value two, you know, value two.
If you go to connect and, well, if you go, it's weird, you have to go to command and then touch the new connect, and then type in value two, and there's a dedicated page, and there's the video and a PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah, so he's done a great job, and that's very timely, that was just created. Bold, Shanka Koska's buyer presentation, who's seen that? Anyone? One. Bold?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, but I haven't seen Sean Cook.
No? Oh, was that before? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Sean Kokoska, this must have been back in the day, maybe 5+ years ago. He had a buyer consult that went through the steps of how you ask for agency and ask for commitment from the buyer. So if you can find it.
That was some years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
5, 6, 7 years
Yeah,
ago.
I've seen it.
And then, of course, one of the other resources that I use for both my buyers and my sellers, it's one of the most valuable classes, and we, as a brokerage, the 3 offices, get Gary Ubaldini's mastermind. That's such a value add to your business. Attend that, understand the numbers, understand how to speak to the numbers. That's what makes you a professional and an expert in this field. If you don't understand how the market's working, you can start being what I call it the deep. Have you heard any, I don't remember where I've heard it, but somewhere in the real estate community, that real estate agents are like a deep roots. And the only way that you can define, you do need to come up with your own value proposition, right? But one of those ways that you really define yourself, you'd be surprised, literally 10% of the agents really understand how the real estate market works and what they can do to advise their clients to either buy, sell, hold, negotiate hard, not negotiate hard, you know, all those things, and they really do matter. What kind of advice you're giving clients. So before we get into any further, I wanted to do I need to know who's in the room besides the people I know. Can you do like a quick little elevator speech? How long have you been in the business, full-time, part-time, with Keller Williams, new or not new? Like where are you at with your business, and what do you hope to do in class other than the obvious? There's anything specific. Go.
Julia Wright, 8th year in business, and I've only used the buyer agreement when I don't want to work with the buyer. And I'm dead serious, and I can tell they're not going to be loyal, and I can tell I honestly said I need this, blah, 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 and bye-bye. So this is going to be a little difficult for me, you know, but I know it needs to be done. And so, yeah, this is my first one of these classes that I'm able to find time to.
Oh, good, yay.
I love Angie.
I'm good.
Charles Stevens, in the business for 10 years, all with KW here in this office. And I've used the Buyer Brokerage Agreement a few times, not a lot, but this is going to help me be more proficient in trying to present it, or not trying, but presenting it, to do a better job of getting it accepted. I used it in the context of with a, you know, we could break up at any time if you want.
Right.
So
right.
that's how I approached it.
That's a good way to do it.
So that's me.
Right across.
Oh, me? Over here? Yeah. Oh, okay.
I was looking at you. I can't see.
Raina. I'm Raina.
I know that.
Okay. I'm going on year 3, just reconnect. I am really wishy-washy with the buyer broker agreement, but obviously I just gotta nail it down and be good at it. So, yeah, I'm a full-time agent.
I'm Cindy Christie, and I'm about a year and a half ago with Keller Williams. And I was taught getting to be with the buyer broker. So maybe I would, that's great. And I just still, I still feel weird sometimes, but I'm more comfortable with it. But I just wanted to take your class to have a different approach and see what I should be doing to be more comfortable. Not be to use Tom and Brian.
Oh, yeah, okay, great. Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I was a part-time agent dual career since October, but I went full-time because I got laid off 2 weeks ago. Yes, blessing in disguise. I'm not in production yet, but I do have a client that I met at my first open house, and I did get a signed buyer brokerage agreement because that's what I thought I had to do anyway.
Awesome. Yes, and that's actually a big lesson, because there's a lot of things that hold agents that have been in business back, because we have preconceived notions about things, and it happens to be taken not at all. But good for you. That's great.
My name is Anna. I've been in the business in 2 months now. I'm pretty new. I came here because Saturday I had my first buyer broker agreement, and I was lost. Anika saved my day. She helped me with a module thing. It was kind of hard too because I have to translate it. Because I had it in Spanish, I have to translate everything. Translating everything at the same time that you're trying to explain it stuff hard. I'm telling you, it's hard.
Yes.
And we had to explain the whole brokerage agreement
Okay.
at the same time, and it was kind of hard. I don't know how to find it in Spanish because most of the people that I know.
I'm not sure that they do, but I bet you could plug it into AI. Yeah, they would convert it for you. That would be fun to try. Like ChatGPT, just copy and paste it, have
That's
it
a
convert
really
it.
good idea.
I think the Florida Realtors has pages dedicated to
That's
it.
a good way,
I mean, they do have, the MLS has Spanish.
Yeah, I think the MLS converts a lot of, I mean, snoop around either Stellar or Florida real estate pages.
Yeah, I was talking to Michelle earlier, and she says we really need to use ours, because ours is basically set up for litigious reasons.
Yeah.
So we can actually go after.
Oh, shoot, that's right. Do we have our own?
Yes.
Oh,
The
man.
only, but the only.
It was
Yeah,
changed
I messed
last
up.
year, I think
Updated.
updated last year.
There we go, let me pull
It
it
was
up.
updated.
Yeah.
Could you
So
please,
where
could
can
you
we-
I'll
email
look
it
it
to
up.
Bree and ask her to print those,
Mhm.
print that one?
Yeah.
Darn it.
But I mean, I would agree, in a perfect world, we should use ours, but it's very small difference. The difference, if I were in your position and language were a barrier, I would go to the FAR one. I mean, the reality is it's been approved by the state, so it might not be perfect for the office, but it'll be better than not understanding.
Yeah, talk to your broker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to your broker about that and
Yeah.
see what they want you to do.
Because Michelle does speak Spanish. She might know that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true.
Yeah.
Debbie Warren, 17 years in the business, 6 full-time, the other time I have another job. I've never done the buyer brokerage, I hate it, but I'm gonna do it. And I like it now. I like that everybody has to do it, it makes it a lot more approachable.
Yeah.
So, looking
They're gonna
forward.
get the same consistent information. right?
Yeah.
Good morning, Jemina.
Oh, sorry.
There's like 6 gens in it.
No, we're both at the back.
Go ahead.
Okay, Jen Messina, I just had my 1-year anniversary. I have never used a buyer's broker agreement. I've taken Nikki's class, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say since we're all forced to do it now.
Jennifer Scales, I have been doing it in real estate for a little over 3 years. My first transaction was with yeah, I had the buyer. She had the seller. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just revamping my buyer's presentation, and I'm excited to learn from everybody, especially somebody like Angie who's experienced and skilled and looked up to. I'd buy from her.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna try to teach to the middle, so maybe if you're brand new, some of the things might not quite connect, and it's because Again, these other resources are gonna dive more into process. As far as like the presentation type things, I have my own presentation. You can take the parts you like and leave the rest and integrate the others as they go, right? Okay. Value in the eyes of the buyer. That wasn't supposed to be there. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, sorry. AI helped me. Value is at the heart of all business because all businesses are an exchange of value. You determine the value that you provide and your clients determine how valuable it is to them. And that's from Value Square from Gary Keller. And again, absolutely true. One of the things that is the gut check about dealing in real estate is understanding that if you know your value, which means you have to do work on that. You have to work on that. You do literally have to do inside job work to understand that what you do and what you offer is valuable. And if you don't really set firm with that understanding, you'll take anything behavior-wise from a client that you should not be subject to, including working for free, right? So it's okay to ask for their business and to ask to be paid for it. It's okay. Now, in certain circumstances, I'm a bleeding heart for first-time homebuyers, especially when they're young. I want to see them succeed. And depending on the circumstances, I may choose to change my stance on what I believe I'm worth, right, to help someone. But that is an act of charity in a good way. You know what I mean? Like I'm choosing to do that. I'm not feeling forced or coerced or manipulated into doing it, right? So understand your value. And if the client you're working with doesn't see it, one of two things: either they're not the right client to work with, let them go, right, Julia? Or learn how to express your value better. It's going to be one of those two things. Okay. Oh, we already did that part. I jumped ahead. Okay, this is one of the big things that is part of your, that needs to be part of your understanding. Fiduciary versus functionary, right? The short story is a single agent is a fiduciary, a transaction broker is a functionary. Can anyone give me examples of what that would mean in like a real life example that's not related to real estate? Like, who else is a fiduciary in the world? Anybody else? Fiduciary. A relationship. All right, we'll read the definition. A functionary is someone who simply does tasks for the client. It's transactionally based. A fiduciary is one who not only does the task of the job, but is also in a high trust relationship with their client. They feel totally responsible for the outcome. They put their client's interests above their own and treat all clients' information as confidential. It is committing to educate, consult, and guide the client to an outcome that you are accountable to.
I think that would be great in explaining a single agent versus a transaction.
Correct. Yeah. The transaction broker is the functionary. The single agent is the fiduciary. Now, who else in the world is a fiduciary? Who else has a job description like that? There are other professions. Doctors, one, attorneys, yep, accountant. They're financial advisors. Some financial advisors are transactional. Some financial advisors are fiduciary. Right? Bankers, right? Same thing. So, what would be an example of a functionary outside of real estate?
Transaction coordinator? Oh, I'm sorry, you said outside.
Outside of real estate, yeah, like a functionary relationship.
Hairdresser.
Maybe, I mean, yeah,
Buying a car.
yeah, buying a car. My favorite is just walk it like a convenience store. They don't really care if I like the bubble gum. They don't. Like, they don't really care if the car wash isn't working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, give me your money and go. And relationship. I mean, even restaurants, you know, do a better job of being a fiduciary, right? They care about your experience, right? So when people choose to be a transaction coordinator, I just did it, a transaction broker versus a single agent, that's the vision that I have. For me, that's how I explain it, right? And that's why I've chosen to be a single agent. Does it come with more responsibility? Absolutely. Absolutely it does. And it also helps define my relationship better with the buyer or seller over someone else who just sees it. Okay. So,
I've looked at the transaction person as just they're only loyal to the transaction.
Right.
They're not loyal
Yep.
to the client or buyer.
Right.
So, it's a relationship.
You gotta be careful too much not pooping on it, because sometimes you have to convert. I had that experience where I oversold the fiduciary. Oh, well, yeah, I wasn't quite as knowledgeable then, but where I oversold the fiduciary of a single agent and then actually had to become a transaction manager and have to explain to them, you know.
transaction broker,
Yeah,
because what, they bought your listing?
because I represent the buyers, and I ended up representing the buyers on my listing.
So I'll tell you what I decided to start doing again, based on my last couple of experiences with that. There is another option. We have single agent, we have transaction broker, and we have no brokerage relationship.
So how would you
can use
get
all
the,
three of them.
how would you get the non-brokerage in there? How would you weave that into that?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a side note. We're gonna talk about it a little bit later. It's actually in your packet. But, I have not, the last couple of times, the market has changed, the litigiousness of the market has changed. I used to represent buyers and sellers all the time, 10 plus years ago, and it wasn't as much of an issue. Lately, it feels icky. They think you're gonna discount your commission because they can be direct. They're looking for some kind of deal, they're looking for some kind of special treatment, and that is not my function. And I do feel serious about my relationship with the seller, and I really don't see how I can represent both sides fairly at that point, because I have an emotional connection with the seller. Like, I'm not just emotional, but I know everything about them.
Yep.
I know everything about them and their property. And so I have chosen the last time this happened, I chose to place it as a no brokerage relationship with the buyer. So I have, and it's in your packet, we can read over that in a minute. And I believe going forward, that even with the buyer broker agreement, by the way, the state does have it separated out where you can, on the actual buyer broker agreement, you can choose no brokerage relationship with the buyer. So it's not just about representing, it's about how you get paid. That's what the brokerage relationship, or the BPDA is about. So, so anyway, is that can go, okay, we'll stop.
Angie, I'm sorry, I just have one question on that before
Yes.
we move on. I've noticed most other brokerages, they're all transaction brokers. What's the thought process with Keller Williams being single to, you know, we can transition?
So transaction brokers are literally loyal to the transaction. So they don't have as much liability to create loyalty to their customer.
Okay.
So it's just a difference. You can find that in financial management too, right? Yeah, sure, you wanna invest in this, I'd be happy to transact for you. Or would you like me to advise you? And would you like for me to represent your interests only, right? So it's just, does it come with more liability? Yes, kind of, sort of. Because there's liability in the transaction broker realm also when you overstep and become a single agent and not on paper, right? So to me, it's just better, it fits my personality to be loyal, and so that's just what I choose.
It's also terminology, and like, we can tell our client, my client, they can't, because of the buyer, you know, it's not their client, like, we are representing them, we truly are there, we're not just and, yeah, and
Right.
And Nikki wants us that way.
Yeah.
She doesn't want us.
Well, and she's suggesting it because it does end up again, creating more of a professional out of it. Honestly. Blah, blah, blah. Let me skip this for now. Move along. All right, so during COVID, I decided to write a book. And it's a little ebook. It was before Gary Keller's book came. And it's just a little ebook, but it was a way I could demonstrate my value through sending it our online registration, open houses, automatically sends them a copy. It gives people an idea of who I am. So I'm not going to really go through it. I'm welcome to, I'm happy to share it with you. It's more about them and very little about me, right? It's about the process that we go through. Preparing for your home search, real estate, 5 things you need. Okay. So there you go. Market dynamics, types of properties for sale, special disclosures. So the rest of this, time, the things that I want to go through is kind of my steps that I take when a buyer calls and say, hey, I want to buy a house. Okay. This helps me, but there's still a phone conversation that has to take place, and it needs to be a connection, in my opinion, that is an immediate next step is meeting in person. The next immediate step is not going to see the house that's on the radar right then. That very rarely works out well, and it's kind of unsafe, especially if you don't know who they are. Have I done it in the past? Yes, absolutely. Do I make exceptions? Sometimes, depending on where the referral came from, like how well the connection is. But again, breaking that rule by not meeting with them and discovering what it is they actually want in the process doesn't typically, the house that they want to go look at isn't very often the house that they actually buy. So, do I do it for goodwill? Yes. Do I do it because I'm going to get a sale? No. Not attached to that outcome at all. Okay? So the first thing I want to do, the very first thing, is I want to build some rapport. So I'll talk a little bit about what they're interested in, but I'm immediately going to their face-to-face appointment. I'm happy to meet them at their house. I'm happy to meet them at Starbucks. And really would love for them to come to the office. So depending on where they are in their circle, I'm not going to force the office thing, because some of my clients are in everywhere else, right? When you do that and you sit down, okay, understand and explain why this is valuable to them and bring the buyer's agreement to you prior to showing homes. So the way I do that is I listen, hey, what's important to you about buying a house? What's your thoughts? I listen to a little bit about, of course, their thoughts and dreams, because they're super excited at that point. They want to affirm that with them. We do talk about immediately, are you paying cash or are you financing? And if they're financing, the immediate next step is, well, so we need to meet in the office. I'd love to meet with you. I'm going to show you how much, we have a lot of things to cover, make sure that you're successful. Again, always about them. It's never about the buyer broker. I don't talk about the buyer broker agreement until very late. We're meeting for them to become successful, which is true. We're meeting so that I can show them the MLS on the backside. I like to pull up the MLS and show them what it looks like to be able to view a property, like the criteria. And if we're not getting enough in their search area, we can real time automatically change it. So I kind of explain that depending on how many details this person wants. I said, would that be of value to you? And they say, yes, that's great. I get very, very little pushback in person, because I'm telling them why right up front. I want to provide this type of value. I want you to be successful. I want this, to be able to get clear on what you want. So that, and another thing I'll use is so that when I see off-market properties, I'll know whether or not it's a good fit for you, and whether or not I should send it to you for review, right? Oh yeah, okay, I learned about that. So they do. They typically do. The other. Oh, and then the other part of that conversation is getting pre-qualified. So once we've agreed on a time, and I say now, it's gonna be more productive if you can get pre-qualified, right? If you're pre-qualified, you know exactly how much money you wanna spend, you know how much your payment is gonna be. It's not just about, can you afford it, it's do you want to afford it? Because a lot of people can, and then they get the payment and they go, I don't want that payment, right? So let's choose to get all that information we can up front so that our meeting is more productive. Does that sound good? Yes, okay, great. Next key thing for me is I say, is it okay if I just do an email introduction to the lender? They'll send you their secure link and you can take it from there. Yes, because I don't, and again, if they come and they go, oh, I already have a lender, great, that's awesome. How many people like to work with the buyer's choice of lenders? They just come to you with their favorite Bank of America statement, pre-approval, Rocket Mortgage, Wells Fargo Credit Union pre-approval. I've got a pre-approval, I'm ready to go. Thank you, oh goody, it's so fun. You know what the differences are? Okay,
Michelle said the way it's written, it actually, we have more ground to sue and also get reimbursed for attorney fees.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference, because I was using the other one and I was told the difference was if you go into litigation, ours protects you, like says whoever loses pays the lawyer's fee. So I think it's pretty minimal, not that that's minimal, but I would guess most of us are not gonna take someone to court for it, but if you did take someone to court for it, we're protected.
right,
I'm sure Nikki's attorney.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
On this, yes,
So-
but unfortunately, Branditis, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, his clients, he showed them the house, they went behind him, and they went under contract. And he was holding them. So I don't think.
No, yeah, you have to get your own attorney.
No, I know that, but I'm saying that they were behind writing.
Yes, they were
That's
right.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I'm.
So that was also my Buyer Brokerage
Yeah.
Agreement. I'm gonna have to go hire an attorney, but why am I not?
Good question, we're gonna answer that. That's a legit question,
That's fine.
and, yeah, and yeah, hopefully we're gonna get there really quick. Okay, so, if they have a lender, I always ask them if they're willing to accept it, or look at a second opinion, because if they're, everybody, you know, all different lenders have different requirements, they have different overlays. It's, I know this lender, I know that they do a great job, and they have some really great rates, and very few people are disappointed with their service or their rate, so, would you be open for a second opinion to take a look and see if there might be a better program? Something like that. Hopefully, they say yes. And usually, my lender, will convert them. She's pretty good. If I have had in the past, buyers that insist on using their lender, and as long as I've explained to them the pitfalls that typically happen when they happen, I'm off the hook. It sucks, I still have to be responsible for trying to keep it together, right? But they're not blaming me because they know I told them so, right? So it's a really important conversation. Make sure you always have a backup lender. Do not just accept the fact that they decided that their credit union from New Jersey is the one that they're going to use. At least put up a fight and offer them an alternative. And, oh, and the other thing too, the credit union from New Jersey, they typically don't understand Florida's market, nor do they understand how we close, because different states have different rules on closings, and that creates a lot of problems too. So when you explain the reasons why, people tend to get a little less defensive, and are usually more, again, if you've been showing value and they understand that you know what you're talking about, it's not a tough conversation. So-
3 months.
Huh?
Canada can do 3 months to close, so our
Oh.
buyers will go, no, you can't put me dollars in fishy at 6 months. We can close in 30 days.
Right.
Everyone's.
Yes, right, exactly. So, what I do, you want to know your packet, when we meet in the office, after they have their pre-approval letter, I have a buyer information sheet, and what was fun about me preparing for this class is I realized, oh, I probably need to update this a little bit. But you know what? It works, and what I end up doing is it creates enough of a conversation. I know the questions to ask now, so I just keep asking and writing, right? But it would be good for me to actually add the questions here, keep them all in line so I don't forget something. But I make sure some of this information I may already have, right? I obviously know their name. I may or may not need their address. I may have their phone number, may have their email. But going through this process with them, again, when you're writing stuff down, fine if you want to do it on the computer, but when you're writing stuff down and listening to them, they're feeling valued. It's about the conversation. This is how you're creating value. You're listening to what they say, you're asking for feedback, you're asking them questions. You know, we get stuck a lot of times on, are you renting or do you own? I rent, okay, great, when is your lease up? Well, it's up in August, okay, great. So are you renting from an individual or are you renting from a corporation? Because what I've learned is that most corporations have a 60-day clause. They need to know your notice needs to be put in 60 days prior. So then I pull up the calendar and I say, let's walk that back. 60 days from August is July, June. We need to be under contract and through inspections in a perfect world in June for you to be able to give notice at the end of June, so that you're not crunched for time. So they're like, oh, but I don't want to have an overlap in between my buy and my sell. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to work really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. There's ways that you can maybe extend the closing to 5 weeks or whatever we need to do. But let me ask you this. Would you rather be short on time or would you rather be long on time? Because if you're in a corporate setting with rent, and you have to go month to month, you're likely to double the rent you're paying right now. So would you rather pay it to them, or would you rather take your time moving in because you have no extra, right? So again, explaining the process helps people. Oh, another big value add that most people don't know or they forget is when you start a mortgage, the month you close, you skip the month, the following month's payments. You don't pay a mortgage payment until the next month, right? And all of a sudden you see this big sigh of relief from all the renters, right? Oh, okay, I have a little bit of space. Try to get it all figured out. Yes, you do. So those kind of things, learn those. Those are the type of things that add value. That's what they need to know. So that's prepping them for their home search, right? Now we start getting into, we've got their lender, we've got their timeline nailed down, right? That we know that they can buy or when they need to buy by, what's in the way of them buying, okay? Then at that point, we go into the details of what they want, right? We talk about the dream. Oh, the dream. 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a pool on a large lot with no backyard neighbors. And an open kitchen, fully updated for $300,000. Oh, best school district, $300,000, or even $400,000, might be kind of tough these days. So, so then you go, oh, okay, great. Write it all down. Write it all down. Now, is a 2-car garage a must-have, or is it a like-to-have? And so I always go back to that. Do you have to have 3 bedrooms, or would a 2-bedroom with a den be okay? Right? So again, the more questions you ask, the more value you're bringing to them, because you're making them think, you're getting them clear on what they actually need. What are their must-haves versus what are their like-to-haves? Do you have to have a fenced yard right away, or can you build a fence? You know, well, as long as I can fence it, it's fine, right? So we hear that all the time too. And what about carpet and paint? You know, are you willing to put in a little sweat equity if we find the right neighborhood and the right floor plan and all it needs is new carpet and paint? Well, I might do that. But the kitchen, I'm not going to do the kitchen. Okay, fine. Then you know. So we write all this stuff down. I do tell them, MLS, you're going to get all of these properties and we'll have to sort them by hand, you know, because MLS doesn't say open kitchen, you know. We can't fix that. but I'll do my best, right? I talked about the differences between single-family townhomes and things like condos and what's going on. Is everyone familiar with what's going on in the condo market? Okay, it's like mayhem, let's just put it that way. It's very, there's a lot to consider with condos, so I kind of dig deeper into why do they want a condo, because they think it's affordable. That's typically what they think. So then you have to go down and, kind of show them why maybe it's not so affordable right now. If there are people that want a condo and that's what they want, that's fine, as long as they're informed on, what's going on in that space right now, okay? So we talk about different types of homes, we talk about HOA preference, I think is a big deal. HOA and CDDs, explain what a CDD is. And, I show them how to calculate, because I consider, I don't know about y'all, but the way I explain it is it's a county-run HOA. It's in charge of maintaining the community amenities, right? So, I explain it that way. So I say, okay, so your CDD is $1,200 a month, but you really love having a pool and a tennis court and all the walking trails, so you're paying $100 a month for it, right? Or whatever it is, or $200. So I make sure they understand those things so that when we get there, we don't have to go over it. Well, like I said, I write down their top 5 must-haves. Those kind of things are really, really important so that you're, again, clear when you see that. If they have a dog and they want to live in a townhome, they need to know what type of dog it is, right? Breed restrictions or a thing, we talk about that. Another thing I see people gravitate toward a lot is flood zones. I think it's really important for people to understand that houses in flood zones typically go for less because you're paying the same monthly price with the addition of flood insurance, right? So, and then, also they have to decide, did the house ever actually flood, or is it just considered an AE flood zone, not an X flood zone, or AE mandatory flood insurance? So, and then I let them make that decision. There are a lot of good homes that are considered in an AE flood zone where flood insurance is required that may not necessarily offend the buyer, as long as they understand the risk and they understand what the cost is. To live there, they may want to live there that much. So that, to me, is, as long as I'm providing the information, they get to make that decision, okay? What else do we talk about? So, asking questions about what they expect from me. So I talk a lot about what they can expect from me, but I also ask them, like, things like, what way do you prefer to be communicated with? Is text okay, or do you prefer email? Do you want me to phone call you? If they say, oh no, text all the way, I say that's great, but understand this is real estate and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there are going to be times when we have to communicate by phone, especially when we get closer to making offers or we're doing the contract process. So just know I'm going to call you, and it's going to be because it's important. It's that important, okay? Yeah, especially, when we get, right? I get lazy with it too. I much prefer to talk by text, but again, you lose some context. You lose, you do need to back up your text, guys. If you don't have a good backup system for text, you need to fix that, like, right away. Because texting is, we talk about this every year in our changes, so I don't know where the official line is right now, but I know just back it up. Just back it up. Don't erase your text messages. Don't do it a year later. Keep your text messages. Find a good backup system and use it. Yeah, so I let them know. So for instance, like, one of the things in my presentation we talked about is it's not unusual, and this is something that I believe Sean Kokoska said, and I use it to this day. It's not unusual for the buyers that work with me to find their dream main house in the first 5 showings. It happens all the time, and sometimes it happens on the first showing. Would it be okay with you, since we're doing all the work now, and I know that you've already seen hundreds of homes, I get that question, or that thing, well, I haven't seen any homes yet. I'm like, yes, you have. You've seen hundreds of homes, if not thousands. And with the kind of information that we get on MLS, the walkthrough tours, and the massive amount of pictures that we can load, you don't need to go see 20 homes by one. If we see 20 homes, it's because we didn't get it right in the console. So their limit with me typically is about 7 to 10. And if we're not really on track, and if there's not a really good reason that we haven't found a home, especially if we haven't made an offer on a home, we're going back to figure out what's missing, right? Because something's missing. There's not enough inventory, especially right now, that there's way too much information available online to have to walk into every single house that you think is cool. You should be able to either choose them as the right one or eliminate them before you go see them, in my opinion. So we do talk about that expectation pretty intensely. If they have something, I'm trying to think, what's another objection? Well, like from a buyer, like standpoint, where you're like, oh, that's not going to serve them well, if they think we should do that.
Waiting for rates to go.
Yes, well, you can talk about that. That's a good one.
I mean, going too low. You know,
Right.
Like, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
relative to the 400, I think I would offer them 330,000. I'm like, it's just if you think about neighborhood knowing it's worth. And also my favorite is, okay, so say we go out today and we find something we like, you know, because I just have this Saturday, it's another reason. And you have to fund the approval. Well, we could pay cash, but, you know, we find exactly what we want. It's okay. You know, we could, you know, we have our one house in the market, but we could pay cash and, you know, they could. Well, they found the perfect house Saturday. We wanted to pay off. She's like, let me go run the number again. No, they want to wait to sell the house. And I'm like, and the thing is you're talking to other people that you can tell it was bought and sold anytime when you start to sold them. And you're like, you know, and I got the really deep breath. Yes, and I just spent 3 hours, 4 hours in Spring Hill. And, and they're not going to wait for the house to sell.
That kind of stuff happens, right? What we're trying to do is close off as many dead ends as we can, right? So that they choose the right path to homeownership, right? I mean, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you do end up in those situations where you're on house 20. I mean, it's not because you're a bad agent. Sometimes it does just happen.
The only buyers that I showed, the buyers I showed the most houses who ever looked at the same floor plan 10 times. It was one of my first buyers, so I didn't fight it too much, but every house was supposed to have the guy. So yeah, some are unavoidable, right? One of the things I do try to warn them, and it kind of is what you were talking about, is I tell people, especially first-time home buyers, buyer fatigue is real. You know, this is really exciting, and you want to go, but it's real. Trust me. And if we go too crazy, and you're looking at things you know aren't going to work, you're going to feel it, and then you might miss out
frustrated
on the right home.
Yes, and that's another thing. If they're new to the area, I will ask them, and I know some buyers don't like the idea. I know they give me the kind of the side eye, like, oh, you don't want to do your job. I'm like, you need to go drive these areas, especially if you're looking at, you know, Seminole Heights or comparable places. I'm like, these neighborhoods are street by street. There may be some that are not in your comfort level. So you need to go drive these neighborhoods, and you will get frustrated very quickly, pulling up to a house that you will never live in, ever, no matter how beautiful it is. So again, that's something else I really want to impress upon them, that to save time, they need to be driving. They need to be driving, especially now. The market's cooler. It's not as, you know, fast. So, let's see, we're getting close on time. Discussing financial options, we talked about that. I do go into that a little bit. I do like having a lender speak to it, because the programs do change. Like, we've had down payment assistance, we've had hometown heroes went for only first responders to everybody, and all of a sudden, like, those things change pretty rapidly. So knowing the basics about FHA and VA are very important, versus conventional, but, I don't get into any specifics with them. How much do you think my payment? I have no idea. It depends on which program, it depends on your credit history. There's a million things that will affect that, so termite, people got home inspections, those kind of things. So if you turn into tax,
So I can tell you what's different.
what's up?
On the exclusive,
Yes.
number 10 is worded differently, and when they added with the new packet that I printed, they added, number 14 and 15. So that's not on the one.
I have my glasses, so I can't read it.
Like one line.
Well, let me do this. So circle those things. You said what?
Number 10 and 14 and 15 were added on the one we just.
Right, so. I'm gonna, take a minute and circle those two, since I need to step up my game.
I went line by line, so where it starts to change is number 10. The settlement is not reached mediation has followed disputes between the parties. Either party may pursue the legal remedy available to in Florida courts located in General County, Florida. The parties wish to agree about the venue to not number 14, 15.
So, I'm sorry, okay, so 10
Number 10.
and 14 and 15. Okay,
10 changed and then they
Okay.
added 14.
so I'm gonna let you all read that. Here's the part that I do in the way I explain it. So I've created all the value at this point, right? The value that I'm gonna be their consultant, that I'm gonna represent their best interest. And we've talked a little bit about single agency and what that means. We've talked about what their hopes and dreams are and how we can best suit, get them to that place. In other words, I've helped set their expectations maybe in like a disappointing way in that, respect that maybe they're not gonna get all the things they thought, but now at least they know the path, right? That assurance, that reassurance that they have someone that's gonna act as the bumpers to make sure that they get there is more important than actually the dream was for most people. So once we get to that place, I say, okay, this is literally my line. I say, you know what, we list our buyers just like we list sellers. All my work that I do for you, this is getting ready to change, so I'm gonna spiel it the way I say it right now. All the work that I do for you is included at no cost. The seller pays my fee. But I don't make any money. I'm commission based only. I don't make any money unless we write the contract together. So the only thing I'm asking from you is loyalty. Is that okay with you? Don't say another word. They need to answer that question. Don't overspeak it. Don't say another word. And I had a guy try to wake me up one time. He just looked at me and was like, yeah, that's okay. Some people need a minute to think. Some people aren't like high responsive people. They want to understand what you just said, and they're either going to come back with a question or they're going to say yes, right? If the objection is, which is a question to me, well, what does that mean, loyalty? I said, well, we list our buyers just like we list our sellers. That means that what I would ask for your loyalty is to have an agreement with me that for the period of time that we choose to work together, and let's say your lease is up in August, so I would say that would probably be a 5-month, thing. Is that okay with you? I don't know, I think I want shorter. Okay, we can talk about it. It's negotiable, right? It's fine. Negotiate it however you want. I'm not gonna tell you what to do there. But if they've told me that they're not moving until, or the lease is not until August, I'm probably gonna pull it to September, right? Or some such thing. So I say, okay, so we have a term that we're working together, and I promise to do my job and represent you fully as your representative. And you agree to use me to write the next contract, or write the contract that you make an offer, so that I can get paid. That makes sense, that's fair. Yeah, great. Okay, the only thing that people get hung up with. This is a state form, it's been pre-done, or broker's form, it's been pre-done. The only thing that people tend to get hung up on, I want to go over with you in person. And I go down to compensation, number 7, and I zoom it in. I make it really big on my screen. And I say, this is the only part, and I want to go over it with you directly. Compensation. Broker's compensation is earned when, during the term of this agreement or any renewal or extension, buyer or any person acting for or on behalf of buyer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement. That means you write an offer on a property and it gets accepted. Buyer will be responsible for paying broker the amounts that's specified below plus any applicable taxes, but will be credited with any amount which broker receives from a seller or real estate licensee who's working with the seller. So does that make sense to you? Because I know it sounds like a double negative in some ways. I mean, I like to tell them, I know it's a little bit confusing in language, so let's talk about it. What does it mean to you? Well, it says that I have to pay you. Right, but it does say over here that you're credited with any amount that the seller or the listing agent provide to me based on the number that we agree on below. Does that make sense to you? Yes, that makes sense. If you slow it down and look them in the face, I mean, what are they supposed to say? Oh, I don't want you to get paid. I'm not okay with that. I want you to represent me for free. I mean, seriously, like think about what that looks like. But if you're serious and you're sincere with your value that you've already added to them, they already know you know what we're talking about. And one thing, I'm sorry, I was going to pull this up. One of the big things that I do is try to explain the market because it's such an abstract concept in the buyers and sellers market, and the media is telling you something different. I zoom, I have my customized search for 7-day rolling total in MLS, actives, pending, that, I'm talking about. Sorry, I should have pointed it out. Go in and customize your search for whatever area you do. I do Pinellas, Pasco, Hillsborough, and Manatee counties. And so that's what my search looks like. And it typically says 1,500 listings came up in the last 7 days. And in that same period of time, and I do this, I point at it, in that same period of time, 1,400 went pending. And I stop. You go, wow, that's a lot. I'm like, yeah, it's almost the same amount as we're listed, right? So it's pretty competitive. It's not as competitive as it was, but it's pretty competitive. And so in that same amount of time, 1,100 closed and sold out of the system. Where people get hung up or confused when they listen to reports or they look at Zillow is that they're looking at price reductions. And you're right, in the price reduction column, there's about 2,100 price reductions from previous listings that didn't sell in the first place, right? But we know that they're still selling at or above list price overall, like the market hasn't crashed, because when you go down and look at the expireds and the withdrawals, they're almost zero. Like they're like 20, 25. If that number starts increasing, then we might have an issue. But right now we don't, because as soon as the sellers, they just overprice their property, as soon as they make it a reasonable price, a buyer finds it, wants to make an offer, it goes under contract. And they're not expiring. They're not expiring. We don't have a major price decrease happening in this. As a matter of fact, the progression. Last year, I think it was 5% year over year. I think is what 2023 report said. We increased by 5%. This year, they expect it to be like 3%. So it's a stable market as far as price goes, right? We're back where we should be. This is what a stable market's supposed to be like. This is where price appreciation is normal. So again, we just added a massive amount of value because it helped clarify what's going on in the market, right? Now they can see, oh, you're right, I'm looking at active listings that are doing price reductions. I'm not looking at actual sales prices that things are closing, right? So that's a big one. So again, when we go through this, at this point, we've already added all the value. They've already seen what it is we're bringing to the table. Sometimes I do talk about how negotiations, sometimes I do, depending on, there's DISC style, is everybody familiar with DISC? The DISC personality? Okay, D is driver, I is your socialites, S is your people who need lots of steady security, C are high numbers people. It depends like what the combination is, like mine's an IB, which means I really want you to be happy, but at the end of the day, we need to get you. So you just have to know who you're dealing with. If they want lots of details, give them lots of details. If they don't, go to the bottom line. Drivers, these, they want the bottom line. Wow, it's 12:05. Any questions? Shoot.
I have a question.
Oh, just real quick, last page, just so you know what you're looking at. Last 3 pages is my sample contract for closing checklist. I give them timelines, dates, and explanations. Once we're under contract, it's personalized to them. And so that they understand what happens next, right? The what happens next conversation is super uber important to this whole process. The more they understand about what happens next, the more value they get from you. Yeah.
And where did you get these forms?
I made them, they're mine. So, yeah, I'll post them on the WTP site.
Okay.
And again, I noticed that we revised it since that one. So they're living documents. You learn something from a client, you go, oh, maybe that should have been my checklist. You know? So none of these things, again, back to my original saying, done is better than perfect. I do a lot of real estate, 20 plus, 25, between 20 and 25 homes a year, just because the specifics are there, and I'm really focused on what matters most. And updating the form, making it a little better, it'll happen as needed, and I'm just not worried about this. Doesn't mean.
Usually it's like, why didn't you tell me this? You're like, I need to add that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a living document for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. What is gonna be your response, like, after this whole thing goes through, where you're gonna have to put in like 3% or 2.5%, and they're like, well, what if, you know, the seller's only offering 2%, but it doesn't have to be, what's gonna be your response?
So, I'm, again, this goes back to what Gary Keller said, is you get to determine your value. And the buyer gets to determine whether it's worth it to them.
And then now they're saying, at the JMBA, we can have the sellers write it in the contract, but the sellers are paying plus.
Everybody's worried about that, and I'm like, VA is not gonna let that happen, they'll be fine. Yeah, so they fixed it. Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that'll happen, so practically speaking, I think a lot of what we're gonna see is sellers that wanna test the idea of not. I pulled this from one of the chat groups early on.
My sellers just pull it, I was a week away from closing, so Julia, I see the settlement disclosure on, I see the 16,000, what if that is a buyer claim for the commission? It's funny you should ask. I said this, we sat down from day one, it was agreed that I was paying, I agreed to X amount of % for a commission, and I'm actually paying, and I even put it all in the phone,
That's
never got a
the point.
response.
That's the point.
Our
Guys,
listing
remember-
agreement breaks it down so well, whereas I think the issue is some states it didn't, right? So it's easy for us, if we already have a listing, to go back and say it's right here, you're paying 86%, right?
Let's keep in mind that the commercial brokers have always worked this way. They've always worked this way. The state says the listing broker earns the commission. It's the MLS who got in our business, I want to get started there, that changed things, and part of the reason they changed them was for good reasons. And this is what I pulled off of the internet. I just thought it was really cool. Sellers who don't offer buyer agent commission will not magically lower the price of their home. Are we all in agreement? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was one of their things. They're saying that it's overinflated because the seller's paying the buyer's agent commission. No, it's not.
Yeah.
That's how economics works. No seller is going to suddenly say, well, I'm just going to list the house for X% lower and pass that savings along to the buyers. It doesn't happen with for sale by owners. Why would it happen now? The majority of buyers won't be able to afford to pay a realtor unless they are able to wrap those costs into their loan, which is exactly what's been happening for the last umpteen years. It was just a concession for the buyers who didn't have $1,000 to have representation and all of their closing costs. So they were able to wrap that cost into their loan, which was part of the appraisal process. That all of it's been absorbed now into the appraisal process. Understand? Okay. So, exactly what they've been doing under the current system for decades. Commission comes from the proceeds of the sale. Are we in agreement? Yes. The proceeds of the sale come from the buyer. They come from the buyer. It's hard enough for buyers to scrape together enough money for closing costs without the ability to wrap that expense into their purchase. Many buyers will end up having to go unrepresented. How do you think that's going to go? The outcome will be the exact opposite of what the plaintiffs claim they seek. First-time home buyers, FHA, especially VA buyers, will be hit the hardest. Sellers, meanwhile, will have the professional representation, but buyers won't have a clue as to what they're doing. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because this needs to be part of your internal conversation on how you're going to start representing yourself to your buyers and why they need you, because they do. They really, really do. So the sellers will have the unfair advantage of representation, which will invariably lead to accusations from the buyers of predatory behavior and even class discrimination. Shocker. Buyer will claim they were disadvantaged because they couldn't afford a realtor. Lawsuits will follow. Results, the plaintiffs and the court seat is not going to happen as they envision. It's going to be the Wild West out there, which, you know. But my point is that know your value, learn how to express it to the buyers. They get to make a choice at that point, as do you, on what you're worth. And I believe at the end of the day, you're going to find that there's going to be more buyers that want representation than not. When you're a listing agent and they start coming to you in droves, I highly recommend you consider a no brokerage relationship, because I think that the litigiousness of all of this can get really, really sticky. I would say so. That's my
point, because like last year, I had 11 of my closings were both sides.
well,
And
that's good.
open houses, baby.
That's great.
Yeah, so 11 I had both sides on. And so my thing is on that is I become a transaction broker and I have represented both sides. So I drop lots of commission on both sides.
You can do that with a no brokerage relationship. You're just not obligated to consult with them. They cannot rely on you for anything that, it's still ambiguous, because it says dealing fairly and honestly, if you look at your no brokerage relationship in your packet. So that's a little ambiguous as to what they consider fair and honest, but at the same time, it does create a little bit more of a stopgap. My loyalty lies with the seller. It does not lie with you. You're representing yourself because you chose to come to me.
Okay. I will say that once last year I sold the house to them 2 years ago with it. We got it for $365 and I sold it for $1.1.
No, it's totally,
so like
it's all good. I think they'll respect you if you explain it correctly.
Right.
I think I think you'll find that buyers will do one of two things, and I'm okay with either one, because I'm not attached to that one. Either you're gonna respect the fact that you are gonna remain loyal, which is obvious, in my opinion. You already have a relationship with the seller. So you're either gonna remain loyal to your client and assist them fairly in the transaction that they choose to make the offer on. In other words, you don't advise them on what type of offer to make. You literally have a stopgap in information. You can provide them with information that any seller would provide a buyer. That's it. So learn your agencies, learn what they really mean. Nikki also teaches a class on that. She's really good at the brokerage relationships. That helps a lot. But anyway, I don't want to hold the hostage. So.
Any
other questions?
Emailed a really neat thing of like the contributions that sellers can do, FHA, VA, FCA, conventional. It's a really nice.
You did?
came by, actually Jason,
Oh,
sitting at
nice.
the table just now, just sent it, and I opened it.
Oh,
So
good.
it's me.
Wow, awesome.
You guys want
Yeah, I'm on
to?
that. Any other questions? Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you so much.
I'll post the stuff if you wanna, already read it.
Please, please.